Hi, and welcome to MC Webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a great topic of skills data that Richard Hewitt, our Director of HE, is going to cover. We have the opportunity to put questions in the control panel if you have any, and we'll endeavour to get back to those as soon as we can at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, then Richard will follow up with those in a follow-up email or personal reply. We are going to go over to Richard now. Thank you for joining us, Richard, and looking forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie, and hello everyone, and welcome to our latest higher education webinar. It's really nice to have so many people joining us, friends of old and some new faces too, or at least names. I look forward to connecting with all of you after this. As the very catchy title of today's session suggests, this is about capturing skills data from program documentation. Of course, I'm going to explain what that means, how we do it, and what this is all about in this webinar. But before we get into that, and apologies to those of you who know us well already, but let me just give you a brief introduction to MZ for those of you who are new to us. MZ is a labour market data analytics and economic consulting firm. We're headquartered in Moscow, Idaho. Very important, that's that Moscow, not the other one. But as you will have gathered, we have UK operation as well. So our mission is to help people make better decisions about their interactions with the labour market, and that's by providing a common language of data. We work with educators, both in higher education and FE, with economic developers, such as you find in local enterprise partnerships, LEPs, local authorities, central government, and we work with the workforce intelligence community, so large corporates and staffing companies. And that work is essentially the supply of highly granular and comprehensive labour market data, both structural, economic, and big data, that we knit together from numerous sources so it can be accessed and understood easily. So in the higher education space, universities are using our data for a range of purposes, from within functions like market insight, employability, careers, student recruitment, and we see our data being used to inform things like portfolio planning, program approvals, course design, careers advice and guidance, and indeed the engagement of prospective students. I don't think there's an open day that goes by without the question as to what career could I do if I study this course? What are the career outcomes like? And our data feeds in to that sort of work. Today, we're focusing on skills data, and you can see from the slide there's you see various different elements of all the data that we do knit together. We've touched on our work with the MZ skills language in a number of our other webinars, and those are available on our website if you want to dig into them a little, or dig into that topic a little more. Essentially, MZ Skills is an open source skills data language that is drawn from what we can glean from the labour market. So we process millions upon millions of online job postings every year, and those of you familiar with our data will know that we extract insight about skills demand from those job postings. We also process data from worker profiles. That's basically information from CVs that people have perhaps entered into an HR portal when they've applied for a job, and they've then ticked a box to agree that their anonymized data can be used for analytics. So from those worker profiles, we can also extract data about skills. So these data sources give us insight into how employers and the workforce talk about skills and indicate what the workforce or indeed employers value or perceive to be of value. And in order to make sense of that data, because it's big data, there's no structure to how you write a CV or enter your experience or write a job advertisement. They can all be uniquely different. Then we need to be able to make sense of it. We need to be able to count it. And in order to count it, because of the nature of big data, we need to standardize those terms. And this normalization process that is a continual work of improvement that we are always doing, but that process has resulted in the MC Skills language. So we've made the library of MC Skills terms open source, freely available. You can learn more about it at the first website there, skills.mcdata.com. And that website there actually explains quite a lot about what it is and what it does, and has some demonstration tools that you can play with to see some prototypes of ideas of how it might be applied. Now, in terms of actual applications, there's some really exciting work being done with it across the pond in the US and North America with the Open Skills Network, and the OSN advances skills-based education and hiring. So you might want to have a look at that as well at openskillsnetwork.org. It's always good to see where things are at in the US with this kind of thing. But in terms of the MC Skills language, while the language is driven by labour market data, so it can reflect changing skills demand and emerging technologies. So basically, we're crunching all those job postings and we're extracting the skills from those. And as things change, we pick up new skills that are coming through and track those which are disappearing. But it's also curated by real people every 2 weeks, every fortnight, to sense check what the algorithms that are hard at work are suggesting. So at the moment, MC Skills, the library consists of around 28,000 hard skills. Many of those are technical skills. In terms of common skills, so we call them common skills, that includes soft skills, but also transferable skills, things like mathematics. So while you could say it's a technical skill, it's also something that's highly transferable, and so that would come for us under a common skill. And it's just something we see in the data. We can see how those skills really pan across lots of different occupations and jobs. And it also includes things like, so these common skills also include things like attributes. So a lot of job postings will talk about the need for enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm is not necessarily a skill, but it's included in the skills language as it's an important, it's an attribute that you see referred to a lot by employers. So, I mean, who wants to employ a misanthropic, curmudgeonly retail assistant, for example? No, you want someone with enthusiasm or in customer service, and so that's something that is valued. And if you're writing a CV to apply for that kind of for a customer-facing job, or indeed a job that involves a lot of teamwork, you might want to emphasize your enthusiasm, and so that kind of thing, it's in the data, it gets picked up. And so while we say skills, it means more than perhaps what we initially think of when we say skills. But yeah, so 300, so in terms of those common skills, about 324 at current count. And we also include some certifications whereby those are licenses to practice, and we have about 1,800 of those. Again, all of this is derived from what we can see from labour market data. Now, anyone who uses Analyst, which is our labour market research tool, will already been using this language whenever they've been consulting job postings analytics reports. So market insight managers might be using the job postings table to track changes in skills demand in a particular job over time, for example. The piece that's always been a bit trickier is connecting the programs that you're looking at to the relevant data from the labour market. So I've spoken before in other webinars about how this can be approached, and some examples include using and then probably refining what we've done in terms of creating a JAX code to SOC code mapping, and that has been done using an approach of likely, reasonable and intentional outcomes. More art than science perhaps, but that reflects perhaps the diversity of what you see across different programs. So we have that, and we have that built into our system, so people do use that. You might use your new graduate outcome survey data to actually use the actual occupational outcomes that your students have reported 15 months after graduation, or maybe you'll use some amalgam of the two of those. Obviously, many universities' planning departments simply ask the academic responsible for the program to suggest what jobs the program may lead on to, and there isn't a requirement to justify necessarily why those jobs have been selected, and so that may be a very subjective list of suggestions there. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, it's just a different way of doing it. So another way to approach this, and this is at the granular end of the data approach, is to extract the skills data from the course documentation and then measure where that combination of skills is seen in the labour market in terms of jobs. And our new tool called SkillSync allows you to do just this. So here it is. I'm screenshotting for these purposes, but certainly when we get to the end, I'm happy to show it to you live. But here it is. SkillSync, it's hosted in our online platform Analyst, but it sits slightly separately, so you don't have to have an Analyst subscription to access it. You would need to have a SkillSync subscription, but the cost basis of that is very different. So the cost per head is far lower than, for example, an Analyst subscription would be. So this is what it looks like in the tool. And then how do we use it? Well, first of all, what we want to do is get a text from a module descriptor, or if you want even more granularity, a scheme of work, and you paste it into the text box in the tool. Now, in this example, what we've got here on the left is a module descriptor from the Open University that is available through their website, and many thanks to them for making that available. I didn't ask them, but it's publicly there. So I've copied and pasted the module description from that page, and it's an arts and humanities unit module, and put that into the skills extractor. And what you can see on the right hand side is how the extractor has then picked out some of those key terms which reflect what we may see in the labour market. So things like art history, religious studies, creative writing, and so on. You can look at that and see, well, hang on, philosophy, Western philosophy isn't being picked out, but that will be because it's not something we see a lot of in labour market data. Now, that's not to say a career as a philosopher is something that people shouldn't be looking to go and do. It's not that at all. It's simply a reflection of what we can see in labour market data, and that's all that is. Now, what you can also see is compassion is there, and see, because people will be studying about compassion in relation to Western philosophy, and that's been picked up. But if you're thinking about, well, will that give people the attribute of compassion? If you think not, then you have a toggle on the right hand side where you could toggle that off, and so you wouldn't include that necessarily in any analysis that you were doing. So you have that capability to toggle things on and off if you think it needs a bit of human input. Again, maybe the study of compassion is something that could make people more compassionate. Who knows? That's a different conversation for different people. But what you can see there at the bottom of this text box are suggested job titles. And so this is taken from this combination of skills, and these are the job titles most closely associated with these combination of skills that are being tagged. And then at the bottom, you have an export button, which allows you to take out those terms and job titles and put them elsewhere. And we'll come back to that. So there are a few things happening here. Firstly, the extractor technology is not seeking to identify every pedagogical item in the document. It's looking for, so it's like I said with the philosophy, I suppose, it's looking for terms that we also see in the job market and in job market data. Those terms don't have to be exact. So for example, if I put in critical analysis, it'll get tagged as critical thinking. That's one example. Here's another one. If we type in R, the letter R by itself, nothing happens, nothing to show yet. But if I then add in, and just free text typing, if I type in Python and C++, then R is picked up, and it's picked up as R, the programming language. And what that is showing you is there's is the contextual algorithm that we've developed is at work there, and it can see the other terms around it, and so it knows, that's not just a typo or just a random letter, that is referring to the programming language. Now you will see on the right hand side of this, it talks about number of profiles and percentage profiles. Those are not particularly relevant to the applications we're looking at with this at the moment, and the same goes for the advanced options which are there. So we are building new things into this tool, and there will be other features that will be developed. At the moment, though, the core features are in place. We don't really need to worry too much about the profiles, numbers and percentages for the higher education application that we're looking at here. So we should also be clear about what it's not doing. So the MC Skills language doesn't attempt to capture the level of competency. This is because it's often assumed in a job posting or CV because of the context. So a programmer won't highlight her Microsoft Office skills in her CV, but perhaps an advertisement for a receptionist might have a certain degree of proficiency in using Office as a Microsoft Office as a key requirement. The programmer could yet still be expected to have an even higher degree of competency than the receptionist, but it's assumed in the job posting, and so it's not there to be picked up in the data. And so we're not looking at that. We're not looking at levels of competency. That's something you can look at overlaying on separately, but it's not something that the skills library is trying to do. The other thing is we're not putting a pedagogical framework around the skills. So in the example you can see on the slide, we've got computer programming added, and that has been tagged as a separate skill. And that's even though the other skills already there are subsets of programming, and that's fine, because what the language is doing is simply reflecting how skills are cited by employers and the workforce. So when it comes to the job title associations, what we see here is the list of skills from the document or from whatever text you've put in being compared with our job postings data. We then count how many of those skills are in each job title that has at least one of those skills compared to their prevalence within the total set of postings, and that gives us their significance. We can toggle which skills are used in that calculation by using that toggle on the right hand side. So if I don't toggle any of them on, it'll so the left hand screenshot, you can see it's none of them are toggled. That will just automatically take all of them. And so you can see there we've got R, Python, C++, and computer programming as the skills. And we can see the suggested job titles as research assistants and research engineers, credit managers, data scientists, software engineers. If we take out C++, and so you can see on the right hand screenshot, I've toggled them all on and then switched off C++. Then we get a different set of job titles which are then associated with those. So forecasters, bioinformaticians, assurance managers, product development scientists, risk analysts. And so it gives you a real rich insight into the impact of certain skills on where they sit in the job market and the relevance they have to different types of jobs. And then we have the export function. So if you click on the export, the result you get is a CSV with the list of skills and the job title associations. So if you're using, and I know not every university does, but if you do have some kind of information management system, it should be quite straightforward to transfer it. Or if you're simply sharing data with colleagues who don't have access to the system, then it's easy to pop that across to them. And again, we have the profile data there as well. As I said, that's not particularly pertinent to the use cases we're looking at here, but the list of skills and the job title associations in CSV. So what are the next steps with skills data? Universities which use analysts can then use the job title suggestions in our job postings analytics tools to investigate those jobs in the local economies relevant to their institution and students, and identify which occupations they fall into. Are they likely to be high-skilled, SOC 1 to 3 occupations, for example? Which industries are employing those occupations in those geographies? Are those sectors in long-term decline, or have they been on a growth trajectory in your area? What do earnings look like at different stages of careers? What are the typical education levels? So yes, you can look at are they highly skilled, but is a typical education level at master's level, or is it actually level 3, even if it is a high skilled occupation? And certainly that is something that we can see in the data. So that's one area. So I've been considering in this webinar, there's a we've talked about using course documentation. Every university and indeed schools within universities have quite different approaches to how they write their course documentation. So while module descriptors at one school will be highly descriptive, at another they might be very top-line summative documents with very little meat to them. And if you're working with the latter style of document, then using a tool like SkillSync may work better with schemes of work, particularly when you're dealing with existing programs. Now, I've been really coming at this from the approach that might be used by, I don't know, a market insight team. But clearly there are other possible applications for SkillSync, and just some thoughts, and feel free to utterly reject them, because every university's context is quite different and the priorities are very different. So what may be rejected by one institution out of hand will be critical to another institution, and I see this all the time. So bear with me, and but some ideas might be employability professionals might use this as a means to engage academics on how they express or articulate the elements of their program which are cited by employers who are recruiting. So helping articulate to students what those might be, and helping academics really engage when they're thinking about their teaching and thinking how what they're teaching connects to the labour market. It gives you a basis for that conversation, and it's an objective basis for that conversation, and it allows you to go into that conversation with maybe some more insight that otherwise would be quite difficult if you're not a subject specialist. Maybe careers teams could be using it to help those students who may not have a vocation. They're not sure what they want to do, and perhaps using the job title associations can help suggest ideas for them to think about based on the skills profile that they've built through their study. And you could use different types of documentation to inform that they may have. The common skills language and the automation in the tool allows skills provision across multiple programs to be audited, and that could be useful for quality assurance, or it could be useful for other academic management functions, perhaps in registry, or maybe commercial CPD teams who are looking at modules that they might want to convert into short courses. We're going to have a lot of demand for reskilling and upskilling with the economic turmoil that's facing us. Universities have this vast range of provision right in front of them, and CPD teams can develop from scratch, of course they can, but you already have a lot of existing content, and if you have the skills audited across your provision, then you can query that and see, okay, where can we go to find relevant content for these skills that people need in the labour market. That could be an approach there. So some ideas, take them or leave them as you feel is relevant, and that's really SkillSync. So if you're interested in using it, or even if you have some ideas for some different applications to those I've just been talking about, I really would love to hear from you. I've been talking with a few universities already about this, and really some interesting ideas coming across, and I haven't said what those are because I promised I wouldn't, because they want to have an edge. But one thing I should also add is our consulting team can actually do all of this for you. So while SkillSync is a self-serve tool, if you were thinking about doing something like a skills audit of your curriculum, you could just give us the entirety of your course documentation, and we could do all of that for you. It's just we've got the capability because we can access all of this directly, and we can set up computer programs to do it. So if that is something that you were interested in, that is something that we are able to do. But anyway, if you want to have a play around with SkillSync, and I remember I said I might show it, so I'm now going to be brave and show you. Where's my mouse gone? Here's my mouse. So here is the Open University module descriptor. Here is SkillSync. I hope you can see what I can see. And if I paste the text in there, we can then see all of that working as you saw in the screenshots. So it's real. It's all real. If I as before, if I type in R, nothing happens. If I type in Python, it picks up R as a programming language. So there it is in real time. It's genuine. So very happy to talk more about that. But Debbie, do we have any questions from our guests?
No, we don't. So obviously you just totally overpowered them with some really good information. And you've done a thorough job, I think, Richard. Thank you.
Well, if anyone on reflection does have some questions, you've got a few seconds to whack them into the question box right now. But if not, it'd be great to connect with you afterwards. It'd be great to get your feedback. I'd be really interested to know how this might be applied within your context. Very happy to talk through that with you. Yeah, let's see where this takes us. But thank you very much for joining me, and I'll look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.